Welcome to Knowledge Nuggets, our series on leadership and personal branding. This is our first in a series of 5 segments that we'll be discussing and involving you in over the next several weeks. I'm here with Diane Sullivan. Diane is a 20-year veteran in the pharmaceutical industry, has held many leadership positions, and has a great outlook on the aspects of brand and personal branding and leadership brand. Diane and I are going to be talking about things today that may be a little bit different for you to put in practice. But we're going to give a framework first of what is leadership brand, why is it important, what is it not, and then finally, what are some of the aspects that you can start doing tomorrow to begin your journey of personal leadership branding. Welcome, Diane.
Hi, Marty. How are you?
Really good. So, Diane, when you hear the term leadership brand, there's some people that have great views of what branding is, and some people that say that's never going to be me. I'm an introvert. I just don't do those kinds of things. So when you hear the term leadership or personal brand, what comes to mind?
I think about what people will say about me when I'm not there. I think about, what is the shadow I want to cast across an organization. So what are the things they want to remember me by? So for me, it's things like being strategic, being collaborative, very entrepreneurial, that I'm very good at developing people and teams and empowering them to do their best work. So that's what I think about, and personally what I hope people take away from my own leadership and personal brand.
I love it. That's great, Diane. You've probably given this more thought than those that you have worked with or have been around you. When you go back and think about how you apply brand within your career, how has it benefited you and where maybe has it fallen short?
So I think about it almost like a product, right? You hope that you have certain messaging and certain ways that you work with people so that, when you're with them, you're able to really conduct business in a really positive and upbeat way. And that, before you meet them, they have a certain impression of you, that there's already something out there.
Excellent.
And then when you leave, then you've met that expectation or exceeded it. And then you're continually developing and getting feedback so that your brand gets stronger and stronger as you move through your career.
That's great, Diane. So when you think about your brand, are you different in work than you are at home? Or is your view of how you portray yourself and how you project yourself pretty consistent across all your different touch points?
I would say that I'm pretty much the same across the board. One, it takes too much energy to be two different people. And two, because I think that's the authentic leadership, that what's important to you in terms of your value system and your personal life should be the same as it is in your work life. And at least it is for me, and that's helped me be myself across the board.
Excellent. So the aspect of authentic leadership, we hear about it a lot in terms of how leaders think about themselves, how they project themselves, and you've carried that forward in trying to show up as your authentic self in all different touch points, correct?
Right, absolutely. And I find that people who I work with, I enjoy and appreciate them the most because they're the most down-to-earth, the most authentic, most self-aware, that they're really trying to do the best job in their personal and their professional life.
It's great, Diane. So when you think about those aspects you put out about your brand, how do you ever test if it resonates, if it's compelling, if you have to change it over time? So you have those elements that define you and carry forward. Do you ever figure or kind of try to understand, are these resonating, and is this actually really driving towards something that you aspire to be too? So how does that element of compelling brand kind of shine through with you?
So for me, it's really about peer mentoring. So I have a few people that I rely on to be completely and totally honest with me, and they tend to ask for the same. In a meeting, did what I say go over well? What could I do differently in terms of what I'm trying to achieve? And then 360s, doing a formal 360, which many people do, having a coach or talking to your boss, but even with your boss, being completely honest about this is where I am today. This is what I'm really trying to work on. Here are the strengths I think that can help these developmental needs that I'm working on. And really having a thought partner. So a thought partner in your boss, a thought partner in your peers, doing some formal feedback through 360 or other kind of Survey Monkey kinds of tools, but getting that feedback on a couple times a year to continue to improve your style.
Great. A lot of the topics that we talk about in terms of branding are probably the same characteristics or traits that you talk about branding a company. So branding a company of 1 versus branding a company of 5,000, a lot of the terms are the same. And that interesting term pops out at differentiation.
Yeah.
Do you think about how you're different than others in the market, in your company, those around you that you engage with? Is differentiation a term that pops up
Yes.
as you start thinking about your brand?
Yes, I think it's really your value proposition. So your differentiation is what makes you different based upon your background and what do you bring to the party. So for me, having a background at IBM was very different because IBM taught me to think in terms of information flow, product flow, financial flow, and that's been the foundation for my career. That's differentiated me in pharmaceuticals. I think the other piece is just having really broad experience, having a lot of different experiences in my career has helped me to be a very broad leader and be able to look at businesses even through things like business development where having that background has helped me figure out how do I look at a business differently, what is the possibility of this business, what will differentiate, what can we be best at and out of the crowd. And I think about that for me personally as well. What can I be best at?
That's
how can
great.
I bring the best to the
I love it,
organization?
Diane. So you mentioned to me before we came on that you've been in the pharmaceutical industry over 20 years, and you mentioned IBM as almost the starting point for your brand. A lot of things that were true about you then are extending through your life and your career now, 20 plus years later.
Right.
So that aspect of what made you great 20 plus years ago, it's not the same. It evolves and it moves onto a different platform, but it is tied back to 20 years ago.
Yeah, I would say so. But I think from a leadership perspective, I certainly wasn't a very strong leader when I was at IBM. And as you grow in your leadership and you get all this feedback and you try new things, I think that you become more of a leader, a much broader leader across industry with the ability to think across industry.
Yeah, there's a framework that I like to think through that might be helpful. It's when we're young and proving ourselves, we rely a lot on the quality of what we do and how we actually, not even how we do a job, but just what we do for our job. We really get tied up in our functional value. And 20 years ago, just doing a really good job was good enough. But as you evolve into a leader, there's other aspects that become really important, not just for you, but for those that you engage with too. And it's how you do things, the experience of working with Diane too. So you think about a continuum of value that started 20 years ago around the quality of just functionally doing a good job. Then you go into the aspect of how you do it and the experience of working with you as a leader. Then the topics of what do you actually solve for an organization? And that might be, to me, one of the most important things around branding is what do you actually solve? So it's extending beyond the quality of what you do to what you solve for an organization. Have you given that thought in terms of when somebody gets Diane into their organization, you are really great at solving this for this type of company?
Right. Yeah, I think it's a really good point, Marty. I like the way that you frame that up. I think it's what are you trying to solve for your boss, right? So
Great.
your immediate boss, and really think about if you were the CEO, what would you want you to do?
Yeah,
so I think
that's
about
great.
that for myself. And then how can I work with my peers to build the best, strongest team, which is probably one of the biggest critical success factors when you achieve a level, that we're talking to an audience here. And then how do you get your team to understand the bigger enterprise level view and not just their own swim lane? So I think it's really looking at it from the CEO's perspective, your boss's perspective. Think about you as a peer group running almost a mini part of the company.
Great.
And then how do you get your teams, all of your teams collectively, your own direct reports, but then broader, really on board with the mission of what you're all trying to accomplish together.
That's great, Diane. So in that way, your personal brand then extends to a team brand, and then it really starts aligning to the overall corporate mission and vision and the brand that company's trying to create too. So there is that true alignment when done really well, correct?
Exactly.
Great.
Yep.
So just let me take away some things I heard, just to make this into a little bit of a framework for others. So a brand has to be authentic. You can't be different people. It's just too much work, as you said, if you try to be different across different venues. It has to be engaging. You have to show up to engage others on your team, your boss, others in the organization, so your brand has to engage others. It does have to be relevant. It does change over time. What was good at 20 years old isn't enough to carry you forward today. You think about creating value for the organization in terms of what you solve, not just about what you pull away from an organization, but what value you create, and that kind of keeps you thinking about how to add value as an owner. And then ultimately, the word of differentiation, which a lot of people probably think about but don't know how to get to, should be top of mind when you think about your brand too, because you are swimming sometimes in a sea of sameness, thinking about those attributes that pull you out and make you different, and really make you rise above the others in the market is okay to think about, right?
Right. It absolutely is, because that's what makes the company competitive.
Yeah. That's
So
great.
really, companies are made up of people, and people differentiating themselves on behalf of the company and trying to bring a unique contribution will differentiate the company in the market. And if once that's successful, everybody's
Love
successful.
it. Great. Thanks, Diane. That was great insight on how to drive alignment between personal, team, and corporate brand to be really a truly effective leader. So this is the end of Knowledge Nugget number 1 on what is personal leadership brand. Our next Knowledge Nugget will continue the conversation around why is brand important and actually what brand isn't, which is as important to understanding truly how to develop your brand.